After the divorce, I moved to another country and started a new life. He married the one for whom he left me. At his wedding, an old friend accidentally mentioned my secret. At midnight, I saw 30 missed calls from him. Before the story engulfs us completely, write a couple of words about yourself, where you are from and what your age is. I value everyone who is with me now. Enjoy listening. 12 years is enough time to turn into a faint shadow, and Alina Sachiva walked this path with the diligence of a straight-A student. Without noticing it herself, she worked as a pharmacist in a laboratory, took double shifts, returned home with feet buzzing from fatigue, and cooked dinner for her husband Eduard because he did not like restaurant food on weekdays. Too expensive, he said, although he himself insisted on a house in an elite cottage settlement and on a BMW, without which, according to him, partners would not take him seriously. You understand, Alina, he explained to her in the first years of marriage, flipping through real estate catalogues. In business, they judge by appearance. We need the right address. She understood, she always understood, that was her main mistake. At business dinners, she smiled at the partners' wives, discussed cosmetologists and vacations in the Maldives, although she herself had not been on vacation for 3 years. Eduard was always too busy, too overloaded, too essential to his construction materials trading business. Alina learned to exist in waiting mode. Wait for him to free up, wait for the right moment to talk about children, wait for life to finally begin. For the last 3 years, she checked his bank statements every Saturday, finding hotel bookings and receipts from jewelry stores for jewelry she never received as a gift. She asked questions, already knowing the answer. It's for a client, Eduard replied without looking up from his phone. Vorobyov's wife, remember her Jubilee? The company had to give something. Alina nodded and hid the statement in the desk drawer with the others. Accepting the truth would mean admitting that 12 years of her life was spent on a person who saw her only as a function, a proper wife for a proper image. On that March day, she returned home earlier than usual because of a migraine that hit right in the middle of a work meeting. It squeezed her temples like iron vices and would not let go. On the kitchen table lay his mobile phone, something he never forgot, his constant connection to the world of deals and negotiations. The phone vibrated, and a message from Victoria Simonova appeared on the screen. Last night was incredible. I miss you every second. Love. Alina sank onto the couch, still in her coat with her bag on her lap, and began reading the correspondence methodically, message by message, month by month. Hotels, restaurants, promises, plans for the future. Eduard wrote to this girl things he had not said to his wife for many years. That she was special, that with her he felt alive, that he could not wait for the moment when they could be together openly. Victoria turned out to be that very new girl from the sales department whom Alina had hosted at home for Friday dinners, cooked her signature dish for her, and asked about her family. A 24-year-old graduate of a prestigious university, daughter of the shipping company owner Boris Semenov, long-legged, blonde, with the confidence of someone who had never known need. Strangely, Alina did not cry. Inside, something quietly cracked, like thin porcelain cracking, and after that click, gluing the shards back was already impossible. Eduard returned 2 hours later, whistling something under his breath, and froze on the threshold of the living room, seeing his wife with his phone in her hands. For a second, it seemed he would start wriggling, inventing explanations, calling her paranoid and jealous. But instead, he shrugged, a short gesture that hurt more than any confession. Let's talk like adults, he said, sitting in the armchair opposite. Alina, you understand everything yourself. We've long become roommates. When was the last time you looked at me? When did you dress up for me? I worked 10 hours to pay for the house you wanted. Exactly, worked. And Vika, she makes me feel like a man. Alina looked at the person with whom she had lived for 12 years and did not recognize him, or perhaps saw him for the first time as he really was, without the pink veil she had woven herself from hopes and self-deception. Leave, she said, and her own voice frightened her with its calmness. Alina, don't dramatize, we can discuss everything civilly. Leave. She packed 3 suitcases with his things. Expensive suits, shirts, ties, all that on which he insisted because image decides everything in business. Eduard stood in the hallway, watching her fold his life into suitcases, and in his eyes strangely mixed resentment, what was especially indicative, and relief. You'll regret it, he threw from the threshold. At your age, starting over. He did not finish, the door closed. Only then did Alina allow herself to slide to the floor right in the hallway and sob silently, clamping her mouth with her palm. The divorce was formalized with indecent speed. Eduard's lawyer called every 2 days, hurrying the documents. The house was put up for sale, the profit was divided in half. Bank accounts were split with accounting scrupulousness. Eduard agreed to any conditions just to make it faster. Strange, noted her friend Marina when they sat in a cafe over cool tea. With his character, and suddenly so compliant. The reason became clear later. Victoria was pregnant, already in her 4th month. Eduard was hurrying to close the old chapter and start a new one with the right woman from the right family. During the divorce, the lawyer asked Alina about additional assets. "Is there anything I should know?" He inquired. "Real estate, accounts, investments." Alina hesitated. Her grandmother of Dokia's voice sounded in her head. A woman who was widowed at 32 with 3 children, refused a new marriage, and built her own empire from nothing. 4 years ago, she died, leaving her beloved granddaughter a special inheritance. An account in a European bank with an investment portfolio that by then had grown to 50 million. "Men come and go," grandmother wrote in the attached letter, "but good money stays. This is for when it's needed. And if not needed, even better, means you managed on your own." "No," Alina said to the lawyer. "Nothing additional. By law, the inheritance was not joint property. She violated nothing." At 38, Alina found herself in her mother's apartment, who had gone to her brother in Kaliningrad, in that very room where she lived as a teenager, prepared for exams, dreamed of a bright future. Now she lay on the single bed among old pharmacology textbooks and stared at the ceiling at 4 in the morning. At what stage had life made this cruel turn? In 2 months, she lost 6 kilograms. Shadows settled under her eyes, her hair dulled and hung in lifeless strands. Colleagues in the laboratory spoke to her in that special voice used for the seriously ill and recently widowed. "How are you, Alinochka?" asked the head, and in her tone slipped poorly hidden curiosity. "Fine," Alina answered and went to the storeroom to wait out the spasm in her throat. Voronezh turned out to be an unbearable small city. Everyone knew everything. Everyone saw Eduard with pregnant Victoria in the shopping center, in cafes, in children's goods stores. Everyone had an unsolicited opinion. "Better now than in 20 years, consoled the neighbor on the landing. "You'll find someone better. Go to a cosmetologist," advised a former classmate. "Dress up, put on makeup, you can't let yourself go." Eduard's mother called every week. "Alionochka, you know I always loved you more than all his girls," she sobbed into the phone. "You were a real daughter to me. And this tail twister and a child born from betrayal." Alina listened, not knowing how to comfort her mother-in-law when she herself needed comfort. After such conversations, she took out her phone and deleted a few more photos. Trips, dinners, moments that seemed happy but now turned into evidence of her blindness. Here they are at the sea 3 years ago. Eduard hugs her shoulders and smiles at the camera. He was already looking at other women then. Here is the New Year's corporate party, she in a dress he chose because he thought he understood fashion better. He was already dreaming of getting rid of her then. The doctor prescribed sedatives without which she could not sleep. "You need a change of scenery," he said, writing the prescription. "Go somewhere to relatives, friends. Here you won't stop." Alina nodded and hid the prescription in her bag, knowing she would not go anywhere. Going meant admitting defeat, meant surrendering and agreeing that Eduard had won. One evening, she ran into them in the supermarket. Eduard pushed the cart. Victoria walked beside him, her hand on her rounded belly. They were choosing baby food, bent over the shelf, quietly discussing something. Alina froze in the middle of the aisle with a pack of pasta in her hand, unable to move. Eduard raised his head. Their eyes met. He nodded politely and distantly, like to casual acquaintances. "Let's go," he said to Victoria, turning the cart in the opposite direction. Alina stood in that aisle for another 5 minutes, staring at the shelves with baby food and trying to remember why she had come to the store at all. At home, she lay on the bed fully clothed without turning on the light and stayed that way until dawn. Outside the window, the city awoke, the city of her youth, her collapse, the city where every intersection held memories of a life that no longer existed. She was slowly dying here among these streets and faces, among sympathetic looks and malicious whispers, drowning, and the only thing still keeping her afloat was pride that did not allow admitting final defeat and fear that paralyzed her every time she thought about starting over. The doorbell rang on a Sunday morning when Alina lay on the couch in the same wrinkled pajamas she had not changed for the third day, staring at the TV screen where some renovation show was playing. She did not understand a word, she just watched the flashing pictures because the silence in the apartment pressed harder. She did not stir. The bell repeated, insistent, demanding. The kind people ring who are not going to leave. Then again and again. Alina Viktorovna, I know you're home. Lyuda's voice easily penetrated through the thin door. Open up, or I'll call your mother and say you're going completely crazy here. Alina got up, feeling her legs numb from long lying, shuffled to the door, and turned the lock. Ludmila Nikonova, a friend from school days who knew her before Eduard, before marriage, before all this nightmare, stood on the threshold with a bag in her hands and an expression on her face like mothers preparing for a serious fight and not planning to retreat. Lord, exhaled Lyuda, looking her over from head to toe, lingering on the tangled hair, on the dark circles under her eyes, on the ribs sticking out under the stretched t-shirt. Have you eaten anything in the last week? I ate, lied Alina, although the last thing she remembered were crackers the evening before last. You're lying. Get dressed, we are going to my place. Lyuda, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not asking what you want. Come on, move, my cheese pancakes are getting cold. An hour later, they sat in Lyuda's kitchen, bright, with geraniums on the windowsill and cheerful yellow curtains, such a normal, such a lively one compared to her mother's apartment, which had turned into a crypt for Alina. She chewed the cheese pancakes through force, seeming like cardboard to her, although she rationally understood that Lyuda cooked excellently and the issue was not in the food but in herself, who had unlearned to taste anything. Outside the window, the Sunday city bustled. People walked dogs, children rode bicycles, somewhere a group of young people laughed. Life went on as usual, not noticing her personal apocalypse, and that made it even more bitter. I accidentally met your boss at the bank last week, said Lyuda, pouring tea into large mugs with cornflowers. He asked how you are, said he's worried, said you're on pills just to function at work. He had no right. He had the right because he cares, unlike you yourself, judging by everything. Lyuda sat opposite, folded her arms on the table, and looked at her with that gaze Alina remembered from school, direct, not tolerating excuses. Alina, answer me honestly. What keeps you in Voronezh? Alina opened her mouth and closed it because there was no answer. Work. But she barely coped. Every day turned into torture of concentration, a struggle against the desire to burst into tears right over the checks. Family. Her mother had gone to her brother in Kaliningrad. Friends. Lyuda could come anywhere. The others she counted as friends during the marriage years turned out to be wives of Eduard's partners, disappearing from her life along with him. Memories. Every corner of this city, every cafe, every intersection reminded of 12 years spent on a person who shrugged when she discovered his betrayal. Exactly, nodded Lyuda, reading the answer in her silence. Nothing keeps you, only pride and fear. Lyuda, I sent your resume to a pharmaceutical company in Minsk. Lyuda raised her hand, stopping objections. Don't interrupt, let me finish. The vacancy is for a clinical research coordinator, salary 40% higher than your current one, growth opportunities, international projects. They are interested, Alina, very interested. Your experience in regulation, your publications, that's exactly what they need. Interview via video on Wednesday if you agree. Alina stared at her friend, finding no words, feeling a strange mix of indignation and something like timid gratitude rising inside. You're dying here, continued Lyuda quieter, covering her hand with hers. I see it every time we meet. You're drowning. Alina, I'm not going to stand on the shore and watch my best friend go to the bottom. I remember you before him. Remember the 22-year-old girl with burning eyes who was going to turn the world of pharmaceutics upside down, who dreamed of her own research, scientific articles, doing something important. Where did she go? Dissolved in the role of Eduard's wife. Well, that role no longer exists. Now you can become whoever you want, but not here, not in this city where every passerby looks at you with pity or curiosity. Alina cried, for the first time in weeks, not from pain, not from humiliation, from something else, from a strange feeling like gratitude for someone still believing in her when she herself had long stopped. Give me the number for the interview, she said finally, wiping tears with the back of her hand. 3 weeks later, on a July Wednesday, Minsk Airport. Alina stood at the baggage claim belt with 2 suitcases and a backpack containing documents for the rented apartment and a printout of the employment contract. The interview went better than she expected. although she connected from her mother's bedroom with freshly washed hair and in a snow-white blouse hiding sleepless nights and lost kilograms. Sergei Zakharovich Chizhov, the director of the research department, turned out to be a calm man of about 55 who was more interested in her experience in international regulation, publications on pharmacokinetics, and results of third-phase clinical trials than the reasons for moving from Russia. "We need specialists of your level," he said at the end of the conversation, and in his voice there was no condescension or pity, only professional interest. "I'll send the contract today." The taxi took her through an unfamiliar city. Wide avenues of Soviet monumentality mixed with modern buildings, lindens, and chestnuts along the streets, people on summer cafe terraces, a completely foreign life in which she had to find her place. The studio apartment on the third floor turned out to be tiny, only 30 square meters, but with a balcony overlooking a quiet street and natural light flooding the room until evening. The main thing was that there was nothing foreign here, no ghosts of the past, no memories of joint dinners, no photos to hide. The first night she slept on an inflatable mattress among unpacked boxes, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city outside the window. Somewhere a car passed in the neighboring apartment, music played muffled on the street, a group of young people laughed. She cried about the woman who no longer existed, about 12 years that could not be returned, about a life crumbled to dust from one indifferent shrug. But she also cried from relief that came unexpectedly and imperiously, from relief that tomorrow she could go out on the street and no one would look with pity, no one would ask in a sympathetic voice how she was holding up, no one knew her story. At 38, she was starting from scratch, and for the first time in months, something vaguely resembling hope stirred inside, weak, barely discernible, but alive. A year in Minsk changed her in ways she could not have imagined. Work absorbed 10 to 12 hours a day, but it was a different fatigue, not the one that sucked life drop by drop, but the one that comes from creating something of her own, from feeling her own significance for what she could do, not for whose wife she was. She found a kinetic shop on Independence Avenue where an elderly seller in thick glasses recommended novels tailored to her mood with frightening accuracy, and every Saturday set aside something new for her. She discovered a cafe in the upper town where the owner, with an unruly curly face and infectious laughter, started setting aside almond croissants for her. "You always take the same table," the cafe owner noticed one day, placing a cup in front of her, and the same order. "I like regular customers, I like constancy." "I like constancy," Alina replied and caught herself smiling, that her facial muscles remembered this movement, although it seemed they had long forgotten. In the laboratory, she befriended Ekaterina Gonkarova, a 32-year-old biochemist with inexhaustible energy and a habit of saying what she thinks, who dragged her to salsa lessons in a dance studio in the city center. "You dance like a scared giraffe," Katia laughed after the first lesson, wiping tears of laughter, "but that's completely fixable. Believe my experience, I stepped on the instructor's foot 4 times. He probably curses the day you brought me. He's used to it, he has a professional deformation. You'll come back next week?" Alina came back the next week and the week after and a month later, first out of stubbornness, then because she really liked it. Liked feeling her body, liked laughing at her own clumsiness, liked being part of something light and joyful. She gained back the lost kilograms, cut her hair into a modern bob she would never have dared before. After all, Eduard preferred long hair, started buying clothes she liked herself. Bright dresses, large rings, platform boots, small rebellions against the woman she had been before. After 7 months, she was promoted to Deputy Director of Clinical Research. "You deserved it," said Sergei Zakharovich, handing the promotion order in front of the whole team. The protocol was approved without a single remark that happens once in a decade. "I'm glad it happened in my department." She called her mother in Kaliningrad with the news and for the first time after the divorce cried tears of pride. Not bitter, not pitiful, but pure. Weekly conversations with Lyuda became her link to the past, a reminder that there existed a version of her before the catastrophe and that this catastrophe did not define her entirely, did not erase everything she had been before. "That Eduard is getting married in November," Lyuda reported one autumn day, and caution was heard in her voice, readiness for any reaction. To Victoria. "How are you?" Alina paused, listening to herself, expecting pain, jealousy, bitterness, but found only emptiness, calm and almost pleasant. "I feel relief, if honestly." "Strange, yes?" "Nothing strange, it means you're healing." On a November night, a year and a half after the divorce, the phone on the bedside table vibrated, pulling Alina out of deep sleep. She opened her eyes in the darkness. Midnight. On the screen, a name she had not seen for months. Eduard. The call dropped and started again, insistent, demanding, again and again. She lay motionless, watching the number of missed calls grow with a desperation that would be comical if it did not look so pitiful. 10 calls, 15, 20, 30. A year and a half ago, she would have jumped at the first one, grabbed the phone with shaking hands, rushed to the door ready for any emergency, for any of his calls, would have come anywhere in the middle of the night if he asked, because she was that woman who turned her husband's needs into her purpose. But that woman no longer existed. She remained in Voronezh, in her mother's apartment, in wrinkled pajamas on the old couch. Alina put the phone screen down and turned it off completely. Tomorrow is a workday, an important meeting with partners from Moscow. She has a life to live, a career to build, a woman in the mirror she finally likes. Eduard's calls can wait, or better yet, remain unanswered forever. The next day, a November Saturday, the wedding day, Liuda sent a message. I'm here, leading the report. Ready to listen? Alina sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and a technical report she needed to review by Monday when the call came. Country hotel with a view of Voronezh Reservoir. Liuda rattled in a hushed voice, clearly stepping aside from the guests. 200 people, half the city's business community. Dutch flowers everywhere, a giant white tent in the garden. Catering such that I'm afraid to ask how much it costs. The bride's dress is every girl's dream. Lace and silk, all as it should be. The child is a year old, sitting in the arms of your ex's mother, by the way, that same one who called you every week and sobbed. How she puts on a good face in a bad game, smiles as if her teeth hurt. Eduard is nervous, adjusts his tie every 5 minutes, looks around. But that's not all. Alina, remember Anton Savitsky, Eduard's university friend? Now works in Moscow as an investment consultant. Big shot. Vaguely. Well, he worked for several years in a European bank, that very one where. Liuda lowered her voice to a whisper. Alina, he saw your name in financial reports, your grandmother's inheritance, the investment portfolio. Alina froze with the cup in her hand, feeling a chill run down her spine. He told, not out of malice, that's the thing. Stood with a glass of champagne, chatted with guests, boasted about his connections, and casually mentioned that he saw your name in documents, even admired it. Alina turned out to be from a family of successful entrepreneurs. Her grandmother was a real legend, built an empire from scratch in the 90s. 50 million rubles, Alina, he named the amount out loud, in front of everyone. The information spread instantly. You know how it is at such events. And what happened next? Then the circus began. Victoria's uncle, Timur Simonov, a lawyer in corporate and family matters, by the way, immediately perked up his ears, started asking. When did the grandmother die? When did Alina learn about the inheritance? Why didn't it come up in the divorce? Was Eduard aware? You understand what he's getting at. I understand. Either Eduard didn't know about his wife's inheritance and looks like an idiot who didn't control family finances, or he knew and didn't contest it for a quick divorce, and then he's an even bigger idiot who gave up 50 million. In any case, for the Simonov family, for people who count every penny and run every contract through 10 lawyers, this looks like a catastrophe. Victoria's father, Boris Simonov, stood nearby and listened to the whole conversation. His face changed gradually. First surprise, then distrust, then something cold, calculating. He's the owner of a shipping company, Alina, a man who built a business for decades. And here he gave his daughter to a man who either didn't know about 50 million of his own wife's or knew and let it slip. Liuda caught her breath. 5 minutes ago, he called Eduard into the hotel's library for a private conversation. The wedding hasn't ended, guests are dancing, the bride smiles for the photographer, and inside everything is already cracking at the seams. Liuda called back 40 minutes later, and from her voice, Alina understood something extraordinary had happened. Are you sitting? Asked her friend instead of a greeting. Sitting. What's there? The library. I stood in the corridor, pretended to look for the toilet, but listened. The door's there, you know, with gaps. In short, Boris Simonov asked directly why Eduard 3 months ago asked him for money to expand the business, complained about financial difficulties after the divorce, and the ex-wife turns out to be sitting on 50 million in European investments. And Eduard started explaining that the inheritance by law belongs only to the heir, that he had no right to that money, that everything was fair. Simonov interrupted him. The question isn't the law, the question is, Did Eduard know about the money, and why did he rush the divorce instead of discussing everything properly? Liuda lowered her voice. Alina, Semenov already invested 12 million in Eduard's company. 12. And the company, as it turned out, is in terrible shape. Debts to suppliers, salary delays, layoffs. Eduard hid all this. Alina was silent, digesting the information, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and something like sadness, not for Eduard, but for the years she spent on a person capable of such multi-layered lies. But that's not all, continued Liuda. Victoria is also in debt, 8 million in loans and consumer credits, plus 3 million to some ex-boyfriend threatening court. All those trips to Europe, designer bags, restaurants she posted online, all on credit. The father learned about it only now, at his own daughter's wedding. Can you imagine? Where did it come from? Timur, the uncle lawyer, started digging after the story with your inheritance, called some acquaintances in the bank, they checked the credit history. In short, the whole structure collapsed in half an hour. Eduard married Victoria not out of love. He saw in her access to the Semenovs' money, their connections, a financial cushion for his sinking business. She hid the debts, hoping to solve them after the wedding with Daddy's money. Two fraudsters found each other, if you think about it. Alina remembered how Eduard proposed to Victoria 2 days after the news of the pregnancy. She had thought then that it looked hasty even for a man in love. Now everything fell into place. Not love, not responsibility, calculation, cold and cynical, a chance to grab a golden ticket into the family of a shipping magnate. Shouts upstairs, reported Liuda muffledly. Victoria in hysterics, heard through the whole floor. Guests whisper half are already heading to the exit. Eduard disappeared, probably calling you again. Alina's phone vibrated, an incoming message, then another. He's calling, she confirmed, looking at the screen. Messages poured in one after another with a feverish speed that betrayed panic. Alina, answer please. I urgently need to talk. Everything got out of control. Anton ruined everything. He shouldn't have said anything. Just talk to Semenov. Explain to him that I didn't know about the inheritance, that everything was by law. His exaggerating. Nothing terrible happened, just a misunderstanding. And finally, 12 years together must mean something. You can't ignore me like this. Alina read the last message twice, feeling a bitter smile appear on her lips. 12 years together started meaning something to him only now, when the house of cards collapsed. He needed help. When he left her for a pregnant mistress, those years meant nothing. She was expendable material, a function that could be replaced with a younger and more promising model. She deleted the messages without replying, but they kept coming, more desperate, more pitiful, and in them there was nothing left of that confident man who a year and a half ago shrugged and suggested talking like adults. Liuda, she said into the phone, what's happening there now? Oh, you won't believe it. Boris Semenov returned to the hall, stood before the guests, asked for attention. 200 people froze with glasses in hands, and he started speaking. Liuda apparently recorded the speech on her phone. He started normally. Thanked the guests, praised the organizers, all as it should be. Then his voice changed. In our family, we have always valued honesty and transparency. These principles helped me build a business from scratch and maintain a reputation for 30 years and further. Some inaccuracies in information have been discovered. I won't go into details. This is a family matter, but everyone should know. The family takes any form of dishonesty seriously and will reconsider some business and personal decisions in the coming days. Then he raised his glass and said, to the newlyweds, although I sincerely hope this marriage is built on stronger foundations than it seems at the moment. He said that in front of everyone? In front of the guests, in front of Voronezh business community. 200 people? Alina, public humiliation on his own daughter's wedding day. Eduard stood with his jaw dropped, his face went blotchy. Victoria burst into tears again, smearing makeup on her face. Half the guests started quietly gathering for the exit, the other half whispered so loudly it was heard at the other end of the hall. This is the end of Eduard's reputation in the city, you understand? After this, no one will want to deal with him. Alina leaned back in her chair, looking at the evening sky over Minsk, at the city lights that had become native to her, and tried to understand what she felt. Schadenfreude? Not quite. Satisfaction? Perhaps, but muffled, quiet. Rather, relief from realizing she got out of this story in time, that her grandmother's inheritance, that very safety net of Dokia Ivanovna had foreseen for her, remain safe and help her start a new life instead of drowning in the debts of a collapsing business. The wedding formally continues, added Lyuda, but no one eats, no one dances. The family scattered to different rooms. Lawyers are already on the phones checking investment contracts. I'll go too, it's getting awkward even just being here. After the conversation, Alina sat on the balcony for a long time, watching windows light up in neighboring houses, people return from evening walks, the city live its usual Saturday life, unaware of the drama unfolding hundreds of kilometers away. The phone occasionally shuddered from new messages from Eduard. She did not read them, only saw previews on the lock screen. Please, I beg you, you must understand this is unfair. The man who a year and a half ago carelessly destroyed her life now clung to her like a drowning man to a straw, not understanding that he himself created this catastrophe with his lies, his manipulations, his inability to be honest with anyone. The next day, Lyuda sent updates. Boris Semenov demanded the return of the invested money, not all 12 million, but 4 or 5, within 30 days, otherwise a lawsuit. Eduard did not have that money, it went to debts and to that very lavish wedding that had just turned into public humiliation. He would have to sell the car, perhaps a share in the business, perhaps something else. Victoria formally remained married but lost family support. Her father said that if she wants to be with Eduard, please, her choice, but without a penny from the Semenov family. The newlyweds moved to Eduard's aunt's tiny apartment on the outskirts of Voronezh. 3 rooms for 4 adults and a 1-year-old child. Alina read all this sitting in that same cafe in the upper town where the owner set aside her usual almond croissant and felt an unexpected pang of pity, not for Eduard, for Victoria. Yes, she destroyed someone else's marriage, intruded into someone else's family, took someone else's husband, but she herself seemed a victim of his lies, his manipulations, his calculations. The irony of fate. Eduard traded Alina for a young beauty from a rich family, and now this woman ended up in the same situation. Married to a problematic man, living not where she planned, feeling deceived, with a child in her arms and without family support. That evening, the phone vibrated again, an incoming message from Eduard breaking through some messenger she forgot to block. She opened it. What became pleas and accusations, complaints about injustice and requests at least to talk. Then she wrote a reply, the first and last in all this time. I have nothing to say to you. Don't call anymore. Good luck in marriage, you'll need it. She sent it, blocked the number in all possible apps, put the phone on the table screen down. 12 years of marriage, a year and a half after the divorce, 30 desperate calls in one night, all ended with a message of 4 lines. She poured herself a glass of wine, returned to the balcony with a book she had long wanted to finish, and looked at Evening Minsk, feeling a strange lightness spreading through her body with each sip. Eduard could no longer reach her, could no longer ask anything, accuse, demand. He ceased to exist in her life, only memories remained, which would fade over time and become just stories told someday over dinner to new friends. The next morning, an email came from Sergei Zakharovich. I have an interesting proposal for you, come to my office when you're in. Alina smiled, closing the laptop, and went to brew herself coffee, not in a hurry, enjoying the morning silence, the sun rays penetrating through the balcony door, the feeling of life continuing and opening new opportunities. That night, she fell into deep sleep without pills, without waking at 4 in the morning with heaviness in her chest, without obsessive thoughts about what went wrong and when exactly she stopped being good enough. She just fell asleep with the window open, under the quiet sounds of the night city that had become her home. In the morning, when the smell of fresh coffee filled the apartment and outside the window the awakening Minsk bustled, she understood with clarity that comes after a long journey. Every decision was right, to leave Voronezh, to accept the job, not to answer calls, to block Eduard. Her grandmother of Dokia, widowed at 32 with 3 children, built an empire from nothing, refusing others' pity and others' expectations. Now Alina did the same, not with a chain of stores, but with her own life, built brick by brick, decision by decision, day by day. And the woman in the mirror with a short bob, with a bright ring on her finger, with eyes in which the sparkle had returned, this woman she liked.